given an equal chance to succeed.
That's awesome. I so love that. How CannaReps has been supported by is actually the craft industry.
Yes.
And so people ask, like, how do you have all this amazing cannabis product for us to like taste, touch, look, handle, and learn about? And when we teach about certain varieties, you can't even buy it anymore, right? And the thing is, the lesson of the original landrace strain, when we whip out Afghan number 1, they're like, whoa, it's like a relic almost, right? And so that teaches a lesson. The reason why we have access to it is the craft grow, right? And I feel in BC, we're so loyal to that. And when you look at the sales numbers, every other province is doing really well recreational sales. The recreational sales in BC is low because I didn't need to buy anything.
Well, and the other thing is I was on Canada Pot Stocks, our weekly cannabis radio show, and the host Steve Feldman was reading an article to me about, the amount of legal cannabis that's been purchased in BC. And I said, the key word in that sentence is legal.
Yeah.
Right? If anybody is looking at that stat and thinking that BC is consuming less cannabis than the rest of the country, well, that's actually not true. The key word there is legal.
Yeah.
And so I really want to support the regulated legal industry.
Yeah.
But I think we need to give consumers and patients more options there.
Yeah, of course. And I feel that that's where what's super cool is we have a lot of alignment there, right? Because, you first mentioned with GrowTech Labs, it's like, look, we're helping companies help other companies in the cannabis industry thrive, because everybody needs that kind of support. And I feel, as a young entrepreneur, I'm trying to navigate my way through this and breaking through all these barriers. And sometimes you have to make things up and create unprecedented ideas and be super creative and to just go for it and see what sticks, right? And so I love how, whenever I ask questions, you're always there to help. You always provide connections to whoever I need to talk to. So it's something where we definitely feel value, right? If we are not good growers, if we are not, good, let's say, being a retailer these days is real tough. Right? Yeah. So if you can't be at the beginning of the chain or the end of the chain, how do you support everything else in between?
Yes.
Right.
Good point.
And that's where I would say education has a huge role to play there. When we set out to educate the industry, we're like, okay, first of all, you're going to find passion in this, and we're going to empower you with skills. Because like every single cannabis sommelier that walks away can say, okay, I can identify a Kush lineage, I can identify an Afghan lineage, I can grade quality. If you can talk about quality properly, then you're talking about it in a compliant way, because you don't have to always include that conversation about effect. Right. So then, of course, it goes on in terms of the influence of how this affects the industry overall. So whether you're a retailer or if you're even growers benefit from the course, because they can take a look at all the different lineages. Retail distribution reps, they're the ones that are supporting the retailers and like at the dispensaries. And you have to be experts. You have to be ahead of the game. Right. So you have to be very high level knowledge. Right. So education is a huge component of it. And I would say mentoring support through GrowTech Labs, like that's huge. You have a pretty big network. Right?
We are blessed to have a very big network. And one of the things that I was most fascinated by at our meet and greet with our mentors for GrowTech Labs, because we have mentors who are cannabis industry mentors, and then we have mentors that are general business industry.
Yes.
And I found it fascinating that this little event that we had at GrowTech Labs to welcome the mentors, it really struck me that cross-pollination still needs to happen much more between the cannabis industry and other business and professional and community organizations. And people were fascinated to meet each other. They were fascinated to learn. And the number of people who said, that was just amazing. It really highlighted the fact that we do have to do more cross-pollination so that we're building on the strengths of and taking what people have to offer in their professions and in their personal styles and incorporate it to make a bigger part of a successful whole, because you're absolutely right. It's very uncertain times for people. Uncertainty is very bad for business. The regulations, government took the approach. They didn't want to let the genie out of the bottle. They wanted to just take a very thoughtful, cautious approach. So there's still a lot left to fix, and that will be fixed with time. But what's really important is making sure that we're relying on support from untraditional places. So it's important.
For sure. I would agree. I think, sometimes the old school cannabis community might feel, I don't know if the word intimidated or put off by stiff suits.
Well, because their experience hasn't been good. So traditionally, I think a lot of people who have championed legalization have not been treated well. They haven't been treated well by the media. They haven't been treated well by government. They haven't been treated well by the corporate world. So if they're approaching this with a lot of caution, I completely understand that. But one of the hard life lessons that I learned many, many years ago is we forget to redefine our relationships. We either with our family, friends, coworkers, if something happened 10 years ago, we seem to put that same lens on that person or that situation 10 years later. But 100% guarantee that you've changed, that person's changed, and a lot of things that were factors in the situation have changed. So maybe it's just time to say, hey, let's do a reset. Let's redefine our relationships. Let's say, let bygones be bygones. We've had differences of opinion. I encourage that the media is trying now to make a different level of effort in terms of images that they're using or the way they're telling stories. There's lots of work to do, but in fairness to them, there's been massive cuts in the media over years, and they don't have the same time or resources to do a deep dive to really learn about something. So why don't we be partners? And when we don't like something that's said or done, instead of just hammering people over the head, why don't we write to them and say, oh, by the way, did you know? And present them the facts. Because publicly shaming people or calling them out, and this new social media world has made it really easy for people to do things that they wouldn't do face to face with a human, but it's really easy to do with your keyboard behind a screen. Let's not be on the attack mode. Let's be on the, hey, I didn't agree with you, and this is why, which is, I think, more helpful than saying, you guys are just idiots and we don't want to have anything to do with you.
That's right. Yeah. Taking out the judgment.
Yeah. Right? That's the good way to put it. Yeah. Let's take out the judgment.
For sure. Right. And of course we have all past experiences that can lead to that.
100%. Yeah.
Right. But I feel liberated because I had to hide my cannabis use for so long. And I was in the corporate world, and a lot of times I was judged.
Yeah.
And then it created that mistrust.
Absolutely.
There,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, so let's talk to, like the entrepreneurs out there. And if we were to give any kind of advice, how do you know, how do you build a team, or how do you know who to work with, who to collaborate with? Because everything is uncertain.
Yes.
Everyone is saying, I'm an expert in this, but there is no proof of it yet. Right. So what's your selection criteria?
It's interesting. So my selection criteria is everybody and anybody.
Yeah.
Because it has to be, right? I think taking the time to get to know people, to get to hear new ideas, being open to a new way of doing things is really, really important in such a fast-paced new industry. And I think the criteria is really the intention to want to invest your person and of your resources towards positive change.
Absolutely.
Right? Cookie cutter approaches don't always work. It's really important to look at each individual and each situation with a completely clear lens. It's about checking in on our own personal biases. I don't care how evolved somebody is. There is still that voice inside your head that puts your own experience in as a bias. And checking your own personal bias is a really, really tough thing to do.
In the moment.
But the value that will come from that is going to open you to an entire new way of doing things. And we all know that if you want to do things big, you have to be open to a new way of doing them.
I agree. So a lot of times, you think you have the best, grandest idea.
Yeah.
And then you can't do it all by
No.
yourself. You
No.
you really can't, right? If you really want true big impact, then of course you must collaborate.
Yeah.
And so if that collaborator comes in and it's just like, you know what, that idea wasn't so good, or let's take a look at it this way, and let's try to bring in other ideas, and you feel, oh man, my baby idea, my baby,
Yes.
I don't want to let go of my baby.
Founder syndrome,
Right.
right?
But the thing is, one of the bigger lessons that I've learned in 2018 was just being able to drop that idea, learning that it's not a change against you, or you're not breaking anything down. You're truly having a different perspective.
Mhm.
So it's training yourself to have a different perspective and truly empathize with other people. And you're like, okay, I see your perspective.
Mhm.
What your point makes sense. There is rationality there, and let's give it a try.
Yeah.
And when you give it a try,
Yeah.
everybody needs to commit. Okay. So if you don't agree with an idea, if you want to show and be a team player, you need to drop your personal idea and just commit with what the team overall needs, because that is how you get things done.
That's very important advice. And here at GrowTech, I always say I'm not the expert at anything. What I'm good at is bringing the right people together who are really good at things. And that's a key point with any accelerator or capital fund like we are, is to make sure that we are nurturing people who come into the GrowTech family by making the proper connections, but also doing exercises that help them process their way of thinking to see if their way of thinking is actually what's best suited for their business, or if it's time for them to pivot. Because I think there's also the other thing that is hard to do sometimes, which is to recognize that your business is at a different phase in its growth. So you need different talents at different phases.
Yes.
What you need as your startup seed team is very different than when you have grown to the place where you have 50 employees, going from one customer to 10 to 100 customers, but making sure that not only that you're not married to your idea, but you're also mindful that your team has a certain skill set that's really good for a certain phase of your business. But as the business grows, those might not be the right people to do as much as they were doing. So good examples of that are in business in the areas of HR and finance. Right? At some point, the founder and the startup team is doing everything. But then when you've got 50 employees, should you as the CEO, quote unquote CEO, still be doing the HR and the finance? Probably not. Probably those are two key roles that you need to bring in different talent for. They don't have to have the same understanding of your business that you did at the startup, but you have to evolve.
That's true. That's true. And so sometimes, when you start up your own company, you're like, all right, I'm going to be CEO and I'm going to be my own boss. Then let's say $50 million later.
Yeah, which would be a good thing in a way. Yeah.
Are you really the right person to be the CEO of a $50 million company or a $500 million company? Have you operated a $1 billion company before? I don't know. Maybe you're really good at the startup phase and you got to pass the torch. So just to have that humility and say, hey, you know what? You're not always going to be the one to make to call all the shots.
Yeah.
Team building is super important. And as much as you want to select your team in order to grow, you have to trust your team members to really make other good decisions too, of bringing new people on. And you all have to make it work.
You all have to make it work. And you are absolutely right that each different level of the company needs different skills and abilities, and making sure that you remain a part of it. But as a team member, maybe in a different role that is still serving the best interest of not only your company, but all of those who have believed in you and invested their time and money, right? And I think that's the hardest thing sometimes. And it saddens me when I read headlines recently of people who have been founders and in key positions who I think sometimes unintentionally in the new regulated industry aren't fully aware of regulations and guidelines. So we're seeing a lot of people, in being called out for things that they're doing in their business and losing their position, or companies having their licenses suspended.
Yes.
And I think,
a lot of drama.
yeah, right. A lot of drama. And I think that drama can be prevented if companies are very well aware, assessing their leadership team for each phase of their business and adding to the team to make sure that the proper knowledge is there in the best interest of the business.
That's right. It's having a backup plan.
100%.
You know what I mean? And definitely it's important to have that. But at the same time, like I struggle with that on a daily basis because people are like, okay, who makes up your team?
Yep.
And I say unicorn.